What do you do when someone you love is suffering and there's nothing you can do to help them? The next best thing, of course, you help someone else.
So many people have said, I couldn't do it. You're a better person than I am. And that's not, I don't know that that's necessarily true. I just think when something comes your way, whether you expect it to or not, I think you don't know how you're going to react until you're there.
That's living kidney donor Brooke Wozniak. I'm Sarah Jane Castro, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications for the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois, and your host for this edition of The Journey Continues. Brooke, how would you describe yourself to someone who's never met you?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I would say I'm outgoing, friendly, welcoming, relatively intelligent, and I think my friends would say that I'm a compassionate friend.
All great qualities.
Oh, thank you.
What are some of the things in your life that bring you the most joy?
For sure, my family. I know it's probably everybody's answer, but I have, 3 grown, wonderful children. I have one 5-month-old granddaughter, so that's been fun entering grandparenthood. I have my sister, my 2 brothers, and I have my mom. And my mom plays a big role in the story we'll talk about today. But my family definitely brings me the most joy.
Oh, that's wonderful. And congratulations on the grandbaby. That's exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. She's amazing.
Speaking of your mom, can you tell us a little bit about her experience of living with an autoimmune disease, at least from your perspective?
So it's a rare autoimmune, but it's known as Wegener's disease. And the formal title of it is granulomatosis with polyangiitis. Basically, inflammation of the blood vessels. And the blood vessels form masses of immune cells, which end up restricting blood flow to some of the blood vessels in the body, small ones, larger ones, all different size ones. And so the disease often then will affect everything like smaller, like sinuses, your nose, trachea. But then it also, when it goes after kind of the bigger organs, it's usually lungs or kidneys.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. So my mom had her first flare up when she realized, she didn't know what it was. She got just super, super weak and just couldn't support her own weight. And so she ended up in the hospital, and it took a long time to diagnose because it's not an easy thing to diagnose. And she's probably had it for, probably 10 years or so, maybe a little longer. But in the good way, the disease has not affected her lungs or kidneys. It's been primarily for her, it's been more of the smaller, like the nose, sinuses, those kinds of things. She's developed neuropathy in her feet because of it, those kinds of things, but no major organs yet. So that's good.
Okay, great. But still sounds like pretty frustrating to live with day to day.
Yeah. She's in her mid-80s. She's about to turn 83. It's weakened her quite a bit. When she has a flare up, it really takes her down, really takes all of her energy, loses a lot of stamina. And, then when somebody her age too is sedentary for a while trying to recover, they lose a lot of muscle. So it's an ongoing battle for her. And it seems like, you get to a certain point and then you have a flare up and, then you take steps back.
Yeah. What's it been like for you to watch her navigate this illness?
A little heartbreaking, honestly. She lives up in Minneapolis. I'm in the Chicago area. So fortunately, my sister is up there, but hard being far away for something like this. I've gone back when I can. She's had significant setbacks, I guess. She's been in the hospital a few times. She took a really bad fall, and she doesn't recover quickly anymore either. So it's hard. It's hard to see your parents' age anyway. But, when you know that she's battling something every day and, she's got the most lovely disposition of any human on the planet. So you would never know that she's battling every day. But we know because we're familiar now with the disease and we know the behind the scenes. But she's just such a lovely person, and it's just so hard to see her, suffer in any way.
I can imagine that would be really difficult to see, and you'd want to do something. You'd want to fix it for her.
It's like your children, right? You just want to fix it.
Yeah.
You want to fix for anyone you love. And so, yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, nothing I could do other than love her and care for her.
So how did you first learn about Sue and her need for a kidney?
So my daughter played volleyball in high school. Sue is one of her teammates' moms. So we were booster parents together. So we did all the support of the team kind of stuff. And it was actually through just working with her on that for a couple of years. We actually did that. she used to get sick periodically, and she always just called it her disease. She's like, oh, it's just my disease. And she went in and she got treatments periodically, which I came to find out are very similar to chemo, but she still just called it her disease. So she was 45, I believe, at the time of my donation, her receiving the kidney. And so that's very young. Like this disease normally, it usually goes after older people. So anyway, Sue and I worked together a lot. And so I knew she periodically had these bouts of illness, and she had had it for, I think she said like 7 or 8 years at that point. And it had done a lot of damage already to her kidneys. I did know that. I knew that she struggled a lot. She was on the border of needing to go into dialysis. I just knew that she just was not an overall healthy person. And she would have these flare-ups where she would end up in the hospital, or she'd have to go in for her treatments, she would call them, but she never really named her disease.
How did you learn that it was the same disease your mom was living with?
It was so random because it's rare in general, but then for, my mom and being older, okay. And then it was when we finally diagnosed my mom, after I told you it took a little time, and I was working the concession stand with Sue, and I came in and I told her, hey, they figured out, what's with my mom. They said she's got some, random kind of rare autoimmune. And I said, the abbreviation for it is GPA, or Wegener's disease. And I was like, so I said, it's something like Wegener's. And I said, it's trying. And her face just went like, what? Are you kidding me? And I was like, why? She goes, that's my disease. And I was like, you have got to be kidding. And so that just launched us into a whole nother stratosphere of talking. Like Sue's like, I don't really know anybody that has the disease at all. I think she had found a couple of random people that she could find some support with, but otherwise she didn't really know anyone who had it. And so just to even be able to talk about it with somebody was like, wow. So I learned a lot from Sue about it as well, but it affected Sue very differently. It definitely went after her kidneys. I think her lungs are okay, but it's definitely done a lot of damage to her kidneys.
Wow. What did that feel like for both of you to discover this connection aside from volleyball moms?
I think we were both a little dumbfounded. I still am. I swear, after this whole process and everything we've been through together now, I think we're still a little dumbfounded of how it kind of brought us together and where it took us. But she couldn't believe that those were the words that came out of my mouth. And I was so shocked at her reaction because I was sure I had just learned about it. I didn't know anything about it. It just gave us a whole different connection. At this point, she hadn't said that she was going to need a kidney, but she had said that, at some point in her life, she probably would. And then she was debating dialysis and kind of doing all these things. So, but it definitely took us totally by surprise. It also created almost like an immediate bond because of, I think, the rareness. And then to be able to talk about it, it was, just took us to another level.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like you two had kind of grown close working concession anyway. And then this probably totally transformed that relationship.
For sure. Our daughters were friendly, and her daughter was, I can't remember, she was a year or 2 years behind mine. But yes, so we had worked together, all those years and stuff. And so, yeah, we were definitely friends.
So when did she learn she definitely was in need of a kidney and a donor?
I think they had gone to her and just said, it's time for dialysis, and she really didn't want to do it. And, she had talked with her husband, and then her daughter is an only child. So she had talked to both of them and, her family. And, I think it was, she would rather look for a kidney than have to go on dialysis. And so she told me about it, and I just kind of blurted out, like, I'll get tested. Like, it was just one of those, like, it just kind of fell out. There was not a lot of intention behind it. And I'm not going to lie, at first, it just kind of fell out. I think I kind of surprised myself and surprised her. And she was kind of like, really? And I was like, yeah, like, why wouldn't I? Of course, not really thinking, you never think you're going to end up being the one. But yeah, and she hadn't even formalized, she's like, she had told me, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to do a kidney transplant and whatever. And I was like, oh, wow. Just like, I would totally get tested. Who knew what I was signing myself up for? But it was awesome.
Your brain knew before you did that this is
apparently my brain, my heart, something. Yeah.
Yeah. What did your mom think when you told her you were going to be donating a kidney to someone living with her same condition?
She was surprised. I mean, I think everybody, both on Sue's side and my side, were surprised. She was emotional for sure. She was a little hesitant too. She's like, are you sure you want to do this? Thinking about potential complications in my own life. And honestly, after I kind of blurted out that I would get tested and then did indeed follow through with that, like, I became extremely passionate about it, especially as her family members kind of fell off, like they were ruled out for being able to donate for whatever reason. And I was the last man standing pretty early. it was me or she was going to have to go to, be on the registry or something like that. But I had explained to my mom, I can't do anything directly to help my mom. I wish I could, but I can do something directly to help Sue. And my mom actually came in town, and she had met Sue before, but kind of just quick and superficially. And we actually went to dinner. And so to hear those two talking about their disease and how it's affected them and stuff was so cool. I was just like the sideliner. But I think that was really good for everybody. And, I think my mom had hesitations all along just thinking of my health, but she understood, and I told her, I said, if you were in my place, I bet you'd do the same thing. I said, you don't know what you would do until something's put in your path. Because so many people have said, I couldn't do it. You're a better person than I am. And it's not, I don't know that that's necessarily true. I just think when something comes your way, whether you expect it to or not, I think you don't know how you're going to react until you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be in that position to know how you're going to respond.
Definitely.
What was that donor evaluation process like for you? Like physically, emotionally, everything?
It started off and it was almost kind of exciting, kind of clearing the early hurdles of, are you on medications and like blood type and like kind of the easier ones. So it was just kind of like, oh, I did another one. Oh, I did another one. But some of her family members and friends, like I said, were kind of falling off. And so then I think when it changed for me was when you get to the point where you end up going to the hospital and you actually meet the transplant team. And that's a whole day of testing and meeting everyone from surgeons to dietitians to psychologists, psychiatrists, just everybody. And so it's a little intense. It's a long day. They take a ton of blood. I think that was the day where I was kind of like, oh, like, we're really doing this. Like, okay. And so it's a little intimidating. Again, the education was, I think I needed that. Like that was also comforting to just understand the process more, to actually talk to the surgeon that would be doing the surgery. Lots of pieces of it like helped me understand better. And then once all that blood work came back and I was still good to go, it was starting to get emotional for both Sue and I, because she started thinking, oh my God, I might get a kidney. And I started thinking, oh my gosh, I might lose a kidney. But it wasn't even lose a kidney. It was just like, I'd sit across from her and be like, there's going to be like, we still are. Like, how is the piece of me in you? Like, it's just it's crazy. So as it got real, it definitely got a lot more emotional. Yeah, I mean, I got to the end. I was definitely the only one standing for a while. And then it came down to, I had to have my 3 annual exams. I had to have those all done. And that was it. So when I got my last results, which happened to be a mammogram, and it came back, like literally when I opened my results, I knew this is it. If there's something wrong on the mammogram, we're going to have to figure that out. And if there wasn't, then I'm donating a kidney. So it was pretty cool. I opened it up and I was donating a kidney. So it was pretty cool. I called her. There was a lot of tears on both ends of the phone. Still a lot of disbelief. But once it became more emotional for me, there was no turning back. And I was going to be extremely upset if I didn't cross the finish line with her.
I love that it went from just, yeah, sure, I'll get tested to like, I am invested in this. I've got to do this.
And I think you don't really know what you're getting into or anything. Like I said, the further I got, the more vested I was and the more emotional it was and the more determined I was to be like, oh, this has to happen. Because then I started thinking, my God, how could I let her down at this point when I've come so far? I obviously always had my mom in the back of my mind, like indirectly, this was something I could do for her or her disease, something. It was emotional.
It had to feel great, though, to get the confirmation at the end of that.
It did. It did, I think, for everybody. And I think there was a lot of emotions. But I think, overall, I think everybody was we were thrilled. We did it, Yeah.
How did you prepare yourself and your family for surgery and recovery?
I'm an empty nester. So my kids were all gone. And so thankfully, I have amazing friends. My family, my sister and my mom wanted to be in town for the surgery and then be there to care for me immediately after. So that was amazing. A lot of people were like, are you sure you want to do this? You're giving, people question you, I think, for your own good, right? Like, what does it do to the rest of your life just living with one kidney? What are your limitations going to be? All the questions that I had asked too. So just had to kind of get everybody on board, educate everyone like I had been educated. But ultimately, I ended up we had the biggest team of cheerleaders between volleyball players, coaches, teachers at the high school they were at. Like all of that, plus our families and our friends. And everyone was wearing T-shirts for us the day of the surgery. And it was pretty cool. And sending, like selfies from all over the country. And it was pretty awesome. So again, it was a very powerful day.
Has this donation changed your relationship with your own body at all?
A little bit. I would say surprisingly not as much, I think, as people would think. And I always tell people I would do it again in a heartbeat. I was 55 when I donated. I was in relatively good shape. They did say one of the reasons that I did so well with surgery was because I'm a faithful gym rat. I go to Orange Theory Fitness. I have to plug them because they were the reason I was in the shape I was in. And the doctors commented on that. They said just my blood flow, just those kinds of things, like the cardio that I'd been doing, just all those kinds of things were beneficial for me. The first, week or two after surgery is not much fun, but I mean, I have the scar and it's fading all the time, but that's literally it. I have no limitations on my life. I still go to Orange Theory. I can eat what I want, drink what I want, travel. I'm not on medication. Walking around every day with one kidney, you would never know. I would never know. I don't feel any different. I'm very conscious of making sure I'm hydrated. That's the big thing. And I can't take any Advil. And other than that, I highly recommend it because you get so much back in return for what you do. Just the love and the gratitude from Sue and her family, and just people, again, like I said, were so supportive, and people surprise you with their support. And it was great. I mean, I would do it again in a heartbeat.
And it's so important to hear too that you're still able to do all those things you love doing and that were important to you before surgery. None of that has gone away. You're still able to show up for yourself in those ways. I think that's incredible.
Absolutely.
What is your relationship with Sue like now?
So we are still good friends. We see each other periodically. We do a lot of texting, and we actually named the kidney Betty Bean. So a lot of times I'll text her and just be like, hey, how are you and Betty doing? That kind of stuff. So she still shares her labs with me and lets me know they're doing phenomenal. Betty's a little rock star and they're doing her job. And so her numbers are staying really good. She's really healthy with regards to the kidney. She still has to get her treatments, unfortunately, to help handle the disease. But with her kidney function being so much better, it helps her body handle the treatment. She just feels, so much better. She has much more energy. She's just able to do a lot of things that she really wasn't able to do at full capacity before. Like I said, we get together once in a while, and we still sit across the table from each other at dinner going, this is so weird. It's the best kind of weird, but it's just crazy.
I'm so glad to hear that her health is doing well and that the kidney's functioning as it should and helping her out. That's great. How long has it been since the transplant?
It will be 4 years in October.
Okay.
And we had a little false alarm. We were supposed to do the transplant on September 22nd of 2021. We got ready. We met each other. Our families met each other in the waiting room in the morning, very early. And they took me back first. Obviously, they want to prep me first and get me ready before, they bring her back so they can just zip my kidney right into her. So I went back. Everything was going fine. I was all gowned and had IVs. Everything was going. And then they came in and said that Sue's blood pressure was really, really high and they were trying to get it down. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean? They're like, well, we have to get it down. Okay. So anyway, they came back once or twice and it still hadn't come down, and they were going to give her a little bit longer. And otherwise they were going to have to postpone the surgery, which seemed like the whole thing was a little surreal in the moment anyway. And then for them to say something like that, you're like, what? And then ultimately they did. I could hear, I heard footsteps out in the hallway, and then I heard chattering. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but then they came in and said, unfortunately they could not get it down. Her blood pressure was way too high to do surgery, and it was too high of a risk for her. So I was like, okay, what else? What are you going to do? So they literally took my IVs out, brought my little bag of clothes back. And it was just this whole, what is happening? I got dressed. My sister was with me, and we just go out in the elevator. My mom was out there and we got in the elevator. We were all just kind of stunned, I think. And, nobody knew it was next because we had to make sure Sue would be healthy. Whenever she was healthy and ready to go, we'd try again. But the hard thing is, you take time off of work, your family's in town. Everybody had done a lot of prepping for this. I tried to be at my best for the surgery, as did Sue. And she just had a high blood pressure day. But anyway, we got down to the lobby and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. The next thing we knew, the elevator doors opened and Sue and her family came out, and Sue just felt horrible. I mean, we had a super long hug. She was very tearful. She was like apologetic. She felt terrible. And I was like, it's not your fault. And so we all ended up going to brunch together, which I think was really good to just kind of process the whole thing. And then we ended up going round 2 on October 27th. So about 6 weeks later. The biggest thing we were worried about then, it was still a little post-COVID. And so they were still doing COVID testing. And like when they did my COVID test, I was like, oh, if COVID gets in our way, like I was like, come on, like, please, come on, can we just go? So they brought her back a little earlier this time, just in case things were not a go, but she was great. And so as soon as we found out her blood pressure was okay, things happened so quickly. It was like a total whirlwind. And then, I think I was down the hallway and I think I was knocked out before I even got into the operating room. But we had a little hiccup there, but thank goodness they didn't go through with it, because who knows what could have happened.
You don't want to risk anything like that in surgery.
I feel like it was even like more dramatic and more like, please let this happen, you know? So we were so happy that it finally did.
Good. They were just letting the anticipation build a little bit. So
totally, yeah, because there wasn't enough already. Yeah,
right.
It was great.
Was there anything that surprised you about this journey, or something you learned about yourself you weren't expecting?
I think that I learned that you can surprise yourself with things that are put in your path. Like I said earlier, like it wasn't like a bucket list item for me to donate a kidney someday. Like it was never like on my agenda. But just with the way my life came together with my mom and Sue both having that same disease and Sue needing that kidney, it just, like I said, it just kind of started happening and it just kept going. And that's when I do like to try to promote organ donation, because, my experience with donating it was not that hard. I recovered great. And I just feel like there are so many people out there that probably don't even consider doing it, but that could be really healthy donors and make a difference in someone's life. It was very gratifying for me too, which I didn't really think about that part until I think after the process, just with Sue doing so well and how emotionally attached I am to her and Betty, because like every time I am looking to get a return or, of how she's doing, I kind of hold my breath, because I can't even think about if Betty quit doing her job. And I didn't think about that part really either until, again, we're on the other side of it. And you start thinking, oh, Lord, what if it doesn't work? Like, what? Okay, you have it, but what if she doesn't do her job? But thankfully, so far, Betty, knock on wood, is trucking along. I didn't realize how emotional I think all of it was going to be on a lot of different levels. I highly encourage organ donation, at least to get tested. And if you're a match, I would highly consider doing it. It's very rewarding. And the process itself, the physical process, it's not that bad. And the joy that you can bring to somebody else and what you can do for their life, and then it comes back to you 100-fold too. So like I said, if I had an extra kidney still, I would do that one too. I would give that one to somebody too, but nobody will let me do that one. Right. So I'm done.
Yeah, you need the last one.
I'm going to keep that one. But It was a lot too. Like with my kids, before I donated, I made sure like we looked at blood types and all those kinds of things, because, I thought, what if something ever happened to them and they needed a kidney, which I never thought of that before in my life, but as it turns out, we all have different blood types. So I wouldn't be able to donate to them anyway. That was important for me too, because, I think, I had to think about what if any of my children were ever in need and then I couldn't help them, or I had been able to, but now I can't, but I wouldn't have been able to anyway, because our blood types don't match.
If one of our listeners is considering living donation, like they've heard everything you've said and they thought, I'm reasonably healthy, I could maybe do this. What do you want them to know or think through first?
Talk to your family. I would make sure you're okay with knowing that you would never be able to give someone in your family a kidney, because you'll only have one left, and you have to be okay with that. I think educating yourself a little bit about the process, but honestly, I was going through the process pretty blind. Like it just started rolling and we just did it. Make sure you have a reputable hospital or team that you're working with. I really think follow your heart, and if you're healthy and you're somehow being called to do it, you feel the urge to do it, something's triggered you to do it, I say do it.
Go for it.
Yep.
Is there anything else you want our listeners to know about your story?
I'm grateful for the experience all the way from beginning to end. I cannot directly help my mom, but I know she feels kind of ultimately supported. And she's so happy. Like, she asks about Sue all the time too, and how she's doing. And so they'll forever have that bond too. And it touched my life in more ways than I realized it would. And again, to the point that I would do it again. So I highly recommend it. And I'm so glad that I did it. And yeah, it's a bond that Sue and I will never break. That's for sure. It's hard to explain the bond of when you share an organ, but it's kind of intangible, but it's pretty special.
It's almost like sisters, like we share some DNA, kind of, but not really. It's a different kind of thing. So.
Exactly.
A ringing endorsement for living donation.
Well, I hope so. If anybody ever wanted to talk to me about it or get into the weeds about it at all, I'm happy to. I've talked to a couple people that have been in the process. I would highly, highly recommend it, and I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to talk to anybody.
Well, thank you so much, Brooke. I want to thank Brooke again for sharing her story of the joy and hope that can come from living donation. If you'd like to learn more about transplantation or becoming a living donor, visit the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois website at nkfi.org. I'm Sarah Jane Castro, and this is The Journey Continues. Prevention is a key part of our mission at NKFI. That's why at the end of each episode, we offer a health tip.
Here's today's health and prevention tip on quitting smoking. The dangers of smoking are well known. In addition to heart disease, lung disease, and cancer, smoking cigarettes can also significantly increase your chances of developing kidney disease. Smoking slows the flow of blood to the kidneys. When less blood reaches the kidneys, it impairs their ability to function properly. Smoking also increases the risk of kidney cancer by about 50%. Need help quitting? Speak with your healthcare provider or call 1-800-QUIT-NOW for help and resources.